Good morning. Today is 29 October 2018. I'm up in Toms River, New Jersey. I'm with Mr. Donald Fowler. We're going to do an interview here this morning. So, Don, good morning.
Good morning, Jay. How are you?
Very well, very well. If you would, for the camera, if you would just please give us your full name, your place of birth, and your date of birth.
My full name is Donald Fowler. I have a middle name, Kenny, and I put down K for that. I live in Toms River, New Jersey. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, 1936.
Okay. And what war or conflict did you participate in?
Well, actually, it was not war. It was peacetime, but it was during the Cold War. And that was 1960. I was in the Army to 1962. And that was prior to the Berlin War going up, and things that related to me in the service. I'd like to discuss what was my part that I did in the Army at that time.
Absolutely. And I've got some questions that I think will bring some of that stuff out. And I know you've told me a little bit about your father, but can you just tell us about relatives that you had that served in the military?
Yes, my father was in World War I. He celebrated his 16th birthday in France. My brother was in the Korean War. Fortunately, he was lucky because he was on a carrier, okay? My uncles, my cousin, one was a CB during the Korean War. And I just have just about everybody in my family and relatives were in the service.
Well, you want to talk a little bit more about your dad? Because you said he was 16 years old and had his birthday in France.
Oh, sure. He, when I remember during the war years, say from 42 to 44, I lived in Newark, New Jersey, and they would have Veterans Day parade, the Memorial Day parade, and he would take my brother and myself in the parades. He'd give us a little American flag. And he used to say to us, said to me and my brother, he used to say, be an American, stick your chest out and your stomach in. Very patriotic. And I remember that very vividly like it was yesterday. Even walking down the street in Broad Street in Newark, my brother, I remember one time, he said to my brother, take your hands out of your pocket. Be like your brother. But he even took us to, there was this place in Newark called the Sussex Avenue Armory. I don't know if you ever heard of that, probably not. Used to take us there. Anything that was military, he would take us. Unfortunately, my father was gassed on. He was in artillery, and he got gassed on. I would assume, I don't know, but he probably was secondary gassed on because being in the artillery, you're not really on the front lines like the infantry.
Right.
So I guess some of it came over to where he was, and he got gassed on. It affected his respiratory system, and he lived for 20 some odd years without. And he died 1945 on Mother's Day in a Veterans Hospital in New York. And that was very sad. I remember the day that we went over there on Mother's Day to New York. When we went to enter into the hospital, we had to be cleared before we got in. And the gentleman there, the guard there, my mother asked, she wanted to see George Fowler. And he was thumbing around, and he didn't say right away. And he kept on stalling, because he knew that he passed away. So finally he turned around and said to my mother, he said to her, your husband's dead. Instead of going inside and find out, I can remember like it was now. My mother screaming. There was 4 of us. I'm the youngest. Had my sister, my brother, and my other sister. 4 of us were over there at that time. And that was a very sad day. I remember at the funeral parlor, my mother said to my brother, "You're the man in the family now." He was 11 years old.
But he was the oldest, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was very sad. I remember that like it was yesterday. Very sad. But he was very patriotic. Every chance he had, he would. You could tell the way he talked that he was very much loved our country.
He sounds like a great man. How do you think he ended up in the military at age 16 though? Normally it was you had to be at least 18, right?
I really don't know the story. I asked my brother because he's 3 years older than me. He said that he was in the National Guard at first, and somehow he bypassed everybody, and next thing you know, he's over in France.
Yeah, I think at some places you could actually join the National Guard at 16.
Yes.
But you probably weren't supposed
We
to.
lied about his age.
Yeah, probably weren't supposed to go to France.
Right.
But maybe it goes back to that he really was so patriotic that he wanted
Yes.
to sign up early.
Yes,
And
and he ended up over in France. He was in artillery, I think I said that too.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, he also played the tuba
Oh, wow.
in the Army
In the
band.
military, yeah, wow.
Because I remember the tuba, that at that time the tubas were huge,
Right.
okay? And I remember him having the tuba at our house. The tubas today, you can see they're a lot smaller than they were then. But he was in the Army band.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so here's a question that I mentioned to you before, but can you think back to Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked December 7th, 1941?
Well, I can't because I was too young at the time. I can't remember, but I remember after, maybe a year or two after I got a little older and I couldn't understand, I knew that we were fighting the Japanese. And I heard about it, and matter of fact, I met my cousin for the first time. It's probably about 1943. He came home, I never met him before, and he was dressed in his Navy uniform.
Okay.
And my mother said to me, "That's your cousin." So I knew about that. I also, for the first time, saw the uniform of the Marines. At that time, they had red stripes, I think,
Right.
and had blue. That was a beautiful uniform. I know they don't have that today, but I thought that was a fantastic uniform. It impressed me.
The Marines still get credit for having some of the nicest uniforms.
They did.
They still do. They still do. Wow. And you mentioned something about you had a special toy or something, Japanese related or Japanese
Yeah, I had something,
soldiers?
which I picked the toy up and I looked underneath the toy and it says "Made in Japan."
Oh, you got rid of it.
Got rid of it. Not get rid of it, shattered it.
That's funny. Well then, so Don, back to you and your military time. So, can you tell us how you entered the service? Did you join, or were you drafted, or?
Well, I was 23 at the time, and I knew that soon I'd be drafted. So rather than join, they came after me and they got me. Okay, I was drafted in June 21st of 1960. I was drafted, and I went to Fort Dix for training, basic training. Then they sent me out to Fort Ord, California. And that was for heavy weapons. The MOS on that was 112. That was the 81 millimeter. We had the 106 recoilless rifle, which most people don't even know what it is. I'm sure you do.
I do. I've
Okay,
never fired one,
I
but
think
yeah.
it's probably obsolete, a long time ago.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so we trained in that. One of the nice things about that, when I was out in Fort Ord, California, we scored the highest record of any time. So what happened that night, of course, you know the lights go off at 10 o'clock, and 2 minutes after 10, the lights went on. Two lieutenants came in to the room, and they had liquor, beer, wine or whiskey, I'm not sure. And they turned around and said, "We want to know who brought this liquor in here." So we're all looking at each other and said, "Who's the stupid SOB that would do something like that?" And we're getting excited. So he says, "Does anybody want to?" And they kept it up for a while. And we're all getting excited about each other and said, who would do that? And finally they turned around and said, "We did. You guys broke the record for Fort Ord, California, over anybody." And I think these two lieutenants had a bet with each other that his group would do better than the other group. And that's how it all started. But that was interesting.
Did they give you the beer and the liquor?
Oh yeah, I didn't drink much, but
Yeah,
because
so
you know you're gonna have to get up at 5:30 in the morning.
But
So
that was the reward for being the best.
that was the award for doing that.
Now,
Then-
at the time, though, so at the time as you were drafted and going through training, was there discussion that you'd be sent to Vietnam, or was it still a little bit too early with the?
It was still too early, but I heard that probably since you're out in Fort Ord, California, you're more than likely would go to either Hawaii or Korea, okay? But we found out that the division I was supposed to go to, be assigned to, rotated over to Germany 2 years before.
Oh, wow.
So they really screwed up big time. So they sent us back to New Jersey, and from there I went to Germany.
Okay. And so you went to Germany. What unit were you with now?
I was with the 28th Infantry in Munich, Germany. They were part of the 24th Division.
And how was that? How was your initial assignment to Germany?
Actually, the initial assignment was fantastic. So when I got over to Germany, we landed at Frankfurt, Germany. And that was the central point for us to wherever you're going over to in Europe. And then I I didn't feel good. My spine area there, it was very sore and it was bothering me, it was hurting me. So by the time I got to Munich, Germany, I got there on a Saturday. I was there with some other men in the training I had in California, but they went to Augsburg, Germany, okay, and I was the only one going to Munich, okay. So when I got there, it was a Saturday. So when I got to the train station, got off the train, I had to go see the MPs, tell them who I was, etc. So, and by that time, Saturday night, and then when I was at Warner Kaserne in Munich, Germany. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
I have, yeah. They call it Warner Barracks now.
Yeah, okay. So when I was over there, the pain I had in my back was terrible, lower back, spine. And I couldn't hardly even sleep. I laid in the rack that I had. I don't like to call it a bed because it's far from a bed, okay? And Sunday, I just stayed in the bed the entire day. I couldn't get out. I was hurting too bad. And Monday morning, of all the things, they was going on maneuvers out to the field. So I got up, and it was a struggle. So the sergeant said to me, they call you by your last name at that time. Your name is right here, Fowler. He says, carry the base plate, and I was on the 4th floor. Bring it down to the 1st floor and put it in the truck. I said, Sergeant, I can't do it. He says, I'm giving you an order. So he walks away, and I go to the orderly room. And the sergeant says, what are you doing here? He says, you know, you're supposed to follow chain of command. I says, I have a serious problem, a health problem. I need to see a doctor right away. Well, anyway, the sergeant, when he saw me first, says, well, when you go out to the field, you see a doctor. I knew that was no good. And chain of command overseed it. So the sergeant in the orderly room said to one of the clerks there, he says, take him down to dispensary down the first floor. Took me down to the first floor, and there was a major medical doctor. He says, what's your problem? I told him. I pulled my pants down. He looked at me and said, this guy is going to hospital immediately. Because I had a pilonidal cyst. I don't know if you know what that is.
Oh, yeah, I forget.
It was terrible.
Very painful.
Okay, so I ended up at Second Field Hospital in Munich, Germany. I stayed here for a week because they lanced it. I had to go back a week later or 2 weeks later, and then they operated and took it out, okay? Because of that, I had a 90-day profile. Okay, 90 days, that's 3 months. So they don't know what to do with me, okay? So what they did is every time they had a field problem, a lot of the soldiers had no money because we had beer available when the day was over. And what they did, they put me in charge of the soldiers that didn't have any money, and I would mark up how many beers they had. I think it was like 10, 15 cents for a beer, whatever it was. So I did that. So when I got back at the barracks there, I worked in the kitchen, okay? Which was easy duty. But one thing I did which was wrong, to get a pass, they didn't give me no passes, so what I did, I went to the early room and stole the pad and signed as a lieutenant. So that's how I got it. Otherwise, I didn't want to stay in that building, and so I did that. It wasn't right, but being at 23 years old, I think you do things that you shouldn't do, but you do.
Sure.
Okay, it's part of being young.
What
okay?
was your rank at the time? Do you remember?
At the time, I was just a private. Okay, I ended up as a Spec 4.
Right.
Matter of fact, I was up for sergeant. They wanted to make me a sergeant less than 2 years. And I remember another time there I was on guard duty, and what happened was that they asked your general orders, the whole thing, and I was sharp, and I thought I was going to get a 3-day pass because that's usually what they do. They gave it to another guy because he was getting married. So, and I got the second best, which I didn't have to do guard duty, just to be there. That's all.
Right.
But what happened? The guy got sick, and I ended up in guard duty anyway. But getting back to the guard duty is concerned. When I was out in California, in Fort Ord, we had guard duty for the weekend, and so we all had a stand at attention, and had same thing routine as I told you before in Germany. We had to, they asked questions about general order. I think there was 11, I think there were. So he asked me and I gave him the answer. So he goes to the rear of the rank where I was, and apparently what happened when I was putting my uniform on, I sat on my footlocker and there was shoe polish, black shoe polish. So the lieutenant said to me, do you have another pair of trousers? I says, no, sir. He says, pull out to the right or left, I'm not sure. So what happened, the first sergeant came out, the ones that were rejected, and he says, I need X amount of people for KP for over the weekend. But the lieutenant was smart. So what he did, I think they needed 6, I think there was 10 of us that failed. So he started all over again, asking us general orders and how we did, how well we did or not. So after he reviewed me, I stayed there, but 6 of them went off to the right. I said, what's going to happen to those guys? So they turn around and then Cook comes out, sergeant, and he took him in for KP. Okay? Now the next question's going through my mind. What are they going to do with the four of us? I just wondered. You know what he did? Gave us a weekend pass.
Wow.
That was unexpected.
So what'd you do for the weekend pass?
I went to San Francisco.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's right. You were here in California.
I think it's about 100 miles away. We took
Yeah.
a bus there. I'm not sure. But we made the best of it.
Sure.
And that was very nice.
Absolutely. Well, so when you were back in Germany and you recovered from the medical procedure and stuff, did you start going out to the field more often with the unit as a heavy weapons and with the mortar teams?
Yeah, yes, I did. I started going out there, and the cold was not very nice. As a matter of fact, I remember guys crying because of the cold. They just didn't like the cold, so they said, "Fowler, don't you feel the cold?" I says, "I feel it, but not that bad." It didn't. Some people it doesn't bother as much as others.
Right.
Tolerance, everybody has a different tolerance, and mine was, unless I was too stupid to know I was cold. Okay, but the best thing that I think I missed saying a few minutes ago, because of the profile for the 90 days, they came by and they was making an American movie. And the movie was called Armored Command. And it was the major movie stars, Howard Keel, Tina Louise, Burt
wow.
Reynolds.
Yeah.
I participated in that. And that lasted 5 or 6 weeks.
Okay.
I played as a German, I played as an American. I got killed several times on both sides. I spoke in the movie, and the best part, I fraternized with the Fräuleins, excuse me. And I said, I don't need no direction for that, I think I can handle that. So when I got back, I still had time for the 90 days, but I ended up being a good soldier. So they wanted to send me to NCO school. And I think that was, 8 weeks, whatever it was. And I believe when you're in the service, they give you 3 re-up talks. Mm-hmm. I think I had 5 or 6, okay? And the lieutenant, he came from New Jersey also. I might have been a captain, I'm not sure. And he turned around and he says to me, "We like people like you." But that's a re-up talk. They probably tell everybody the same thing. But
well, you got promoted a few times, and it sounded like they were thinking about making you a sergeant as well. So
right, and I remember we had to go on a field trip, and they gave us a test. They gave us a compass, and they said you got to find your way at a certain destination. But along the way, there were signs telling you make a left or right, or go here or there. Some were true, some were not. I was the first one back.
Good.
And the sergeant I had at the time, he was maybe half an hour after me. And he turned around and said, "There must have been something wrong with my compass." "No, there's nothing wrong with your compass. You're not I was better than you." And that was that.
Well, so we mentioned briefly before that there was not really any more talk about sending you guys to Vietnam, but was the Cold War, 1960 to 1962 was still kind of hot and heavy from a Cold War perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, in 1961, what happened then was the Russians wanted to take over Berlin completely. I think they gave us 6 months to get out, okay? And at the base in Munich, we could see the Cold War was getting a little warm now. So they showed us the insignias of the officers, of the enlisted men. They told us that if something does happen, we have to do live action, that we're outnumbered 14 to 1. Because now it was not only Russia, it was all the Iron Curtain countries involved. And they also told us that if we do go to have a conflict, we want to know the next of kin where to send your stuff to. That is scary. I noticed that the guys that I was not that friendly, but you say hello and very, very limited type talking. You got friendlier. And the camaraderie was, we were scared.
Yeah.
And actually, before it got to the worst point, but near the scary part, that we looked like we were going to go to war with the Russians or some type of conflict, I actually had a dream. Actually, it was a nightmare. The nightmare, I was hand-to-hand combat with the Russians and East Germans, because there was the East Germans over there then, okay? That was scary. So even though I didn't experience war, I understood it better than most people. I know that the people that did go to war, it's a lot worse, and their understanding was a lot better than mine. But I understood it probably better than most people who was just in the service and had no type of conflict or anything. They just served their 2 or 3 years, and that was it. But it was interesting, to say the least. And at that time, I don't think I was nervous and afraid. But I think when I got out of the service and years later, I thought about it more, and it affected me even more so. I said, you know, I could have been killed. And that was my experience when I was over there in 1961.
Sometimes folks say the fear of the unknown is actually worse than the knowns of combat.
Yes,
Because
yes.
if you're waiting for the East Germans or the Warsaw
Right,
Pact to
right.
come over, you never know when they're going to come.
Right.
So you're waiting.
Right.
I would imagine too during this period, like all the leaves and passes, time off was probably all canceled or greatly reduced.
Oh yes. As a matter of fact, if you were set to rotate back to the States and you had like a couple weeks to go, you were extended 3 months. What they did at that time, they expanded.
Okay.
Fortunately, I had another year to go because I was due out in June '62, and this was 1961, so it didn't affect me. The only thing I thought about is what happens if it extends the conflict. I'll be over there forever, okay? Or who knows? Maybe shot, killed. You never know. So it was scary. One of the things that came out of this is very interesting. At Checkpoint Charlie, when it got at the worst part, the Russians were on one side of the Russian point, and we were on the other side, and we're face to face with tanks. You can't see this, but that's a picture of the tanks they had over there at that time. It's not very clear.
So these are the Russian tanks?
These are the Russian tanks.
Did you take this or one of your?
No. I got this off the computer.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and one of the guys there was in the Russian army. Okay, one of the things I was trained for, as I told you earlier, I was training on a 106 recoilless rifle. My job was to knock out tanks.
Right.
Okay, and actually they were mounted on a Jeep. They needed a hot rod driver, because the Russians, they told us they could zero in I don't know how many seconds, but it was quick. So you had to get out of there real quick.
Right.
Now, the part that I'm going to mention is amazing. The guy that was in the Russian army lives here at Lake Ridge.
Oh, really?
He lives here, and I know him very well. Nice guy.
Sure. Wow.
And we could have killed each other. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Was he in the Berlin or Germany area?
Oh, he was in Berlin,
Yeah,
right at
wow.
Checkpoint Charlie. I was in Munich at the time,
Right.
but you never know where they could send us. You just didn't know.
Sure.
So,
or if the Germans had really come through the Russians and the East Germans through the Fulda Gap, they would have been.
yes,
potentially all over the place.
So that was interesting part of it, and how I found out about that. I guess I was talking to him here. Was we both play in a bocce team, traveling
Okay.
team.
Yeah, you mentioned that before.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I got talking to him one day, and he told me he was in the service, and I says, "Where were you?" He says, "Berlin." I says, "What year?" 1961.
There you go.
Bingo.
Well, while you were in Germany, how did you stay in contact with family and friends back in America?
Well, mostly was by letters, and sometimes at that time they had a call center you could call up, and I'd call up my mother and see how she's doing, my brother. And my brother got married in 1961. I thought about going home for a couple days because at that time, I think it still is in effect today, that if you're in the service, you could get a seat if it's available.
Yes.
Okay, but I said no. So what did I do? I went to Salzburg, Austria, myself, and it helped because I understand some German. Okay, so that was enjoyable. So it was really an experience during those two. Some were good, some were not so good.
Sure.
But if I had to do it again, I'd do it.
Did you guys ever have any USO shows or big?
Oh yes, they had shows, but I never went
Okay.
at the time.
Okay. Well, we've talked about quite a few incidents that occurred. Were there any other special incidents that really stand out to you during your time?
I don't think. I think the ones I mentioned here were the major ones. There's one other thing too. I think in 1961, I think that Germany went from a wartime basis to they formed over there for our country. I can't think of the name. No longer a wartime. What did they form?
Well, they had the NATO and then
NATO.
the
So they formed that. So they had a parade in Munich, Germany. I couldn't go because I was on the profile, and I wanted to go. Okay. Yeah, they had NATO. That's what they had. The wartime. I think it was 1961 that happened. I'm not sure, but I couldn't make it simply because I had the profile.
Well, and you were maybe making that movie at the time, right?
Well, that was before.
Oh, that was before.
That just happened before that.
Have you seen the movie since? I mean, did it?
I have a video of the movie.
Okay. Is it good or bad or?
It was good.
It was good.
I have a movie of the movie I was in.
Yes.
And I played as I told you, as a German and American and spoke.
Yeah.
I spoke 4 words. Okay. I even had lunch with some of the actors. Okay. Howard Keel, some of the other. Burt Reynolds was not that friendly. Matter of fact, there was more going on off scene that was going on with the movie making at the time. A couple of soldiers didn't like each other, and they were just battling out, blood all over the place. But that's when you go into service, you don't know. There's some real good people and there's some real not so nice people.
Right.
Okay, and they also told us in basic training, just watch everything you do because if you don't keep things locked up, they're going to be gone.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I remember in basic training in Fort Dix where some of the guys would turn around and they put their clothes out on the lines. You didn't have the stuff to have a washing machine and dryers like you have today. And they come back and they're gone. Somebody steals them. So you had to watch everything in service. So I'll tell you another story I had there. So to answer your question now, I start to remember. There was a guy that was supposed to go to Ireland and England with me. And what happened with him, I said, we won't go on payday. We'll wait for a day or two. Then we'll see if we can fly to Ireland and England, or maybe just one of them. And a day before that, I went to the center of Munich for the Opera House at Martes. It was a beer hall. We went there, and I see this soldier sitting at a table with his head on the table, and I said to him, and I recognized his name was Lebo, his last name was Lebo. I says, Lebo, you got to get out of here. He says, we got to go to Ireland and England in a couple of days. He said to me, I can't go. I says, what do you mean? You just got paid. He met a prostitute. He left his pants in another room. So needless to say, we didn't make it. I went to Salzburg by myself.
Okay. Yeah.
That was interesting, but I would love to get a hold of him if he's still alive and talk. He was from Michigan. He was only a kid. He was 18 years old, 19, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was so mad at him. And but that's what happened with him. When you're young like that, you're green. You don't know. You're not city wise. And so it would be, now it'd be interesting, it'd be funny, we'd probably laugh about
Sure.
it. Okay. And now there's another soldier I met over in Munich, Germany. And I did something I should have done. I don't know if you want this recorded, but
It's up to you.
I was a loan shark. So I had money, okay? And I used to lend it out. And one sergeant used to borrow $50 a month from me. He paid me back $75. Now, if he was late, I charged him an extra $5, okay? So this one friend of mine, he thought I was the coolest person alive, okay? And so when he came back from the States, we took each other's phone number, address, and stuff. We met a couple of times. He ended up being a cop in Livingston, New Jersey. And I believe he moved down here to Point Pleasant. I'm trying to get hold of him if he's still alive and to go over some of these memories.
Yeah,
We used to go out drinking together,
Yep.
partying together, and he thought I was the coolest. But you know what? If I had to do that again, I wouldn't do it. I would not do it. A soldier had 3 vices, and I knew it. The more vices they had, the sooner they come and see me. It was either liquor, women, or gambling. And some of them had all 3. They would see me almost in a couple days. That sort of a thing. I'm sorry.
No, did you receive any individual awards or unit awards while you were over there?
I think they give you some type of citation, but everybody gets that. I don't recall what it was. But I was a good soldier. I didn't start out being good, but I ended up being good.
Yeah, no, it sounds like, again, like they wanted to promote you and send you to school, so.
They wanted to send me to school.
Could you tell us a little bit about when you came back, when you were done? You were sent back to the U.S. and probably demobilized, and just a little bit about that process.
Well, yeah, so after I got out of the Army there, I had to spend 2 weeks up in Camp Drum, New York. So we had to play soldiers for 2 weeks. That was the only extra duty I had to do after I got out of the Army. It's 2 weeks of training up Camp Drum. The only thing is we went there on a Labor Day weekend, and it was cold, very cold. It was a bad time of the year to go. Some of the guys, even though they had like 2 days off, a day and a half, they wanted to travel from up there in Camp Drum and come back, and it's a 6-hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was crazy. How much time are you going to spend back? You're going to be free in another week. So I decided not. I stayed up there. But Watertown, which is the next town to it, is like an old farm. Everybody wears overalls and laid back. And you travel too fast, you're out of the city. It's like Fort Dix. What was a little Wrightstown, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was.
Yeah.
It's a very small town there also.
And so then, after the Fort Drum time, did you go back to your parents' house in New Jersey, or where'd you go?
Yeah, I went back to my parents' house, and I had a job already, so and
Yeah, what'd you do after your military service?
well, I worked in a company called Kraft Foods, Kraft Foods, and I quit. I didn't like it. I thought I could do better. I ended up with some jobs in purchasing. I didn't care for them, so I ended up at Merck and Company, and I ended up as a senior purchasing agent at Merck, and it was wonderful. As I told you earlier, I worked in Virginia. I hired local people there, and what it was, we had to retool for a new product that was coming out. So I ended up working there for 25 years. Okay, then we took an early retirement. Package came out, and I took it.
Sure.
And here I am now.
Here you are now. I've got 2 questions left for you. So, if there was one thing that you would like your grandchildren or future generations to know about you and your military service, what would it be?
Well, number one, we didn't have any children. Okay, the only thing I like to say is, I like the people to be more patriotic than they are today. And that bothers me a lot. People are not I ask people questions about simple things about what's going on in the world. They don't even know what I'm talking about. And I say things that goes right over their head. It's all about, even here at Lake Ridge, there's a lot of people who are naive. They just don't know or care. And I call them fat cats. They got everything here, but if something goes wrong and something, they don't have their liberties, they're gonna say, what happened? Okay.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I took from after I got out of the service, that sort of a thing. Very patriotic, and I have some very good friends. Like a gentleman called me up on the phone just before we started interviewing. He was my boss, and we got along great. We still do. I've been out of work for 20 years now, and we're out all the time together. And he's the one that he wanted, even though I was a senior purchasing agent, he wanted to give me a higher position. I had a problem there because there was another woman that was the same level as me, and she had a doctorate degree. And she was jealous as hell that she was going to work for me. And that didn't go over very well with her. But overall, with the life I lived, I think I lived a good life. I'm in my 80s now. But I reflect on it when I get a chance and look at it and say, you know, it wasn't bad at all. Not bad at all. And I met you a couple of years ago, and I told you a story about my father.
Yes.
You said you vaguely remembered it, okay? And, but...
Well, it was good to hear the details, and I do remember it, but I meet lots of people.
But you talk to so many
Yeah,
people there,
exactly.
and it's a one-time shot.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Was there anything else that we didn't cover, or you wanted to record for history here?
I think I told you just about everything. I enjoy living here at Lake Ridge because I participate in sports, and I play a lot of sports. I mix in with people pretty good, and I'm friendly, but some people say I'm a little bit, I'm too intense, okay? But I'm an A-type person. I don't tolerate bullshit. I just don't like it. I usually refrain from saying something to them, but once in a while I'll say something if they go overboard.
Sure. Well, Don, on behalf of the museum, we'd like to present you our challenge coin. You've probably heard of the military challenge coins, but that's on behalf of the National Museum of American and Wartime, and it was a pleasure for me to do this interview with this morning. Maybe just hold the coin up for the camera or something real quick. So.